I've been walking out into the same field now for about 10 years, I suppose. And every morning, all weathers, it's where I live, it's where I work. I think my hands must have touched every single corner of the field, every plant, every piece of timber, every stone block. Around the field are the hedges and the wild orchard. And it's that orchard which remarks the cycles of the seasons for me more than any other part of the farm. In the summer, the plants get really high and they clamber over one another until it's almost impassable. I would cut it with a scythe in late summer, hope of clearing the ground for apples in autumn. But there's nothing that clears it back like the winter, right back to its bare bones. In winter, the walls and the lines of trees and the fields itself, the hedgerows, they're all bare and angular, naked and delicate, and the soil is soft. In some way, the high summer and deep winter are the two moments of maximum expression in nature, of death and life. And both that tumbling green and the bare stone are beautiful and entirely natural in their own ways. There's a point in late summer when the growth has become so heavy, so abundant, when the air is heavy with moisture and the mild days sap the energy. That makes the coming autumn a relief, at the beginning of the great dying back that reaches its lowest ebb in these January days where all life seems to have slipped away. But then, as it always does, spring comes, and we start again, growing. And if you're working with the land, you really only get one chance to do things differently each season, to try something new, to watch how the place reacts, how the plants react. And sometimes you might have to wait for years to see a response, to see or hear an echo of a day's work done in the past. One thing that's clear, though, that cycle, those seasons, the turning of the wheel, they aren't the rhythms our society now follows or listens to. Living on the land or from the land or for the land, you see the turning of time differently. John Berger says that peasants have a different sense of time, that they see time not as something linear, but as a circle that repeats where every action, planting a crop or a tree or raising animals, is done with anticipation of something in the future, so it's always unfinished. In that view, you can only assume that a sharing of the work of today can ensure an abundant future. So today's work is not just a reflection of the future, but also an echo of the past. The work of peasants is in the work of accumulated knowledge of how to live, wisdom of years of living from a place with creativity and resourcefulness and ingenuity. Peasants are part of the ecological systems which sustain them. They've learned from the land, from nature, which has much more to teach us than we think. There are more lessons in nature than those we can find with empirical science. They've learned from many generations of observation and experimentation and listening. Peasant culture is the last link we have to the land-based cultures that have sustained human development and survival for thousands of years. They look back into history and they carry it with them. It's that history which gives them the tools to prepare for the future. For the peasant, the world is a deep, dark forest which we need to find a way through. We need to look for the paths well trodden, the paths made by many feet over many thousands of years, paths which show us how to survive in balance. We could call this culture of peasants a culture of continuity, a culture which understands the value of providing our basic needs for ourselves, understands the precarity of life, understands the hollowness of money. The culture we live in today does not value or hear or even understand peasant culture. It may regard it as primitive, archaic, conservative, impractical. That same culture hosts the greatest inequality in human history, yet continues to promise that science and technology and progress and growth will provide an abundant future for all. That promise seems only to repeatedly enrich a minority at the expense of the many, and acts and pushes to degrade the deep value of living within a natural cycle, replacing it with baubles and trinkets and a life of working to exchange money for your basic needs. Our modern culture gives us the myth of perfection and promises that a permanent sunny smile of happiness awaits us in a beautiful future surrounded by abundance and wealth. But no more than we go through the darkness of winter, and that darkness is as much part of being alive as the light of summer. There's always a trade-off. That imagined life is only possible in our imagination, and that abundance is often only the product of invisible scarcity and suffering somewhere else. We can't hide that fact, And when we try to obscure it and live in the illusion that that darkness doesn't exist, we're more likely to suffer from it. That modern culture, our modern culture, is a culture of extraction. It feeds on the natural world to reproduce itself. It sees time as strictly linear, and onwards march into the future, where one day every human being's individual needs will be completely fulfilled by science, by technology, and by economic growth. That culture of expansion will clear the forest, so there are no trees, no paths, no memories, no reflections of the future, and nothing but economic growth to sustain us. The culture of peasants understands the limitations of the natural world, understands that the future is always uncertain, and the only way to secure it is to share the work of the present. That doesn't mean some life of drudgery or no expression of who we are. There can be growth in a culture of continuity. There can be space for human beings to grow in non-material ways, to consume and celebrate knowledge and art, spiritual and emotional connection over material connections. These messages are also as old as the culture of continuity itself. On our island, the seasons are more pronounced than many other places. The cycle of birth and growth and death and decay is a constant reminder to us that we're only passing through, and for all our hubris, we have springs and summers and autumns and winters long before the first humans walked the earth, and we'll have them long after we are gone. That cycle is eternal, and it is the first and oldest lesson. And we're all looking, I think, at the moment, for a future that we can believe in. Our modern culture forbids us to look back, forbids us to look over our shoulders and see something as subversive or inspiring as a life where we gain meaning from working with others to provide our own needs, where we can learn again to live in balance with the land. In Ireland, because of our history, we have a long path to walk to find those lessons, and some of them we might need to rewrite and relearn. But there's no bad time to start, and no shortage of work to be doing. So the spring is coming, and the first buds are showing in the trees now, and soon we'll see the tumbling abundance of green and an explosion of life and growth as we do every year. We celebrate it, as we do all these moments. We can enjoy the first buds bursting as much as we welcome the last leaves falling, because there's no point on a circle better or worse than any other, or a best place to begin or end.